We are following the latest developments in the multiple legal challenges facing former President Donald Trump. Former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is extensively cooperating with federal prosecutors investigating efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, and his cooperation has Trump allies on edge.
This is absolutely devastating for Donald Trump, and I mean that in the most serious way possible, because what's happening right now isn't just another legal setback that gets appealed away. Mark Meadows, Trump's former White House Chief of Staff, the person who was literally at Trump's side every single day during the post-election chaos, has completely flipped on him and is cooperating with federal prosecutors. Meadows has been granted immunity by special counsel Jack Smith. And in exchange for that immunity protection, Meadows is telling prosecutors that Trump knew he lost the 2020 election, that Trump was being dishonest when he claimed victory on election night, that Meadows personally warned Trump repeatedly there was no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the outcome. And here's what makes this absolutely catastrophic. Meadows has backed all of this up with texts, emails, and contemporaneous notes from inside the Oval Office. Documentary evidence showing exactly what Trump knew and when he knew it. This is not some distant critic making accusations. This is Trump's own chief of staff, the gatekeeper to the president, the person in the room for every sensitive conversation about the election, now providing prosecutors with exactly the evidence they need to prove Trump committed crimes. And Trump knows this testimony could send him to prison. Everyone in Washington knows it. But real quick, before we get into this, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built John Brown's show to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, please subscribe, because you might think you are but aren't. Your subscription actually matters here. All right, let's get into what actually happened. The immunity grant is what made Meadows' full cooperation possible. Meadows initially planned to invoke the Fifth Amendment, his constitutional right against self-incrimination. That right exists because people can't be forced to provide testimony that might be used against them in criminal proceedings. Meadows believed his potential testimony could incriminate himself, which is why he was going to stay silent. But special counsel Jack Smith's team got around this by offering immunity. When witness is granted immunity, their testimony can't be used against them personally. Fifth Amendment concern disappears because testimony is now protected. In exchange for that protection, Meadows had to tell prosecutors everything he knows, and what he's telling them destroys Trump's entire defense strategy. Meadows has testified under oath about what happened inside the White House during the post-election period, about Trump's pressure campaign on state officials, about the fake elector scheme, about January 6th planning, about the classified documents that ended up at Mar-a-Lago, everything. Share this video with everyone you know, because Meadows didn't just provide testimony, he provided the documents to prove it. Texts showing what was communicated to Trump about the fraud claims. Emails showing Trump's directives to subordinates. Notes from Oval Office meetings showing Trump's actual statements when he thought nobody outside the room would ever know what was said. Prosecutors don't have to rely solely on what Meadows says happened. They have contemporaneous records created at the time corroborating every single thing Meadows testifies to. Think about what that means. The White House Chief of Staff is the most important witness prosecutors could possibly get in any case involving presidential conduct. Chief of Staff controls who gets meetings with President, what information reaches President's desk. Chief of Staff is present for the most sensitive discussions about the most consequential decisions. If anyone knows what Trump actually said, actually believed, actually intended during the post-election chaos and the classified document situation, it's Mark Meadows. And now Meadows is telling prosecutors all of it, under oath, with immunity protecting him from prosecution. This is insider testimony prosecutors build entire cases on. Now let me bring the receipts on what really makes Meadows' cooperation so devastating and why Trump's legal team is panicking. The Trump knew he lost testimony. Meadows told prosecutors that Trump knew he lost the 2020 election. Not that Trump was confused about the results, not that Trump received bad information from advisors. Trump knew the truth. He lost. And he pushed pressure campaigns on state officials anyway, pushed the fake elector scheme anyway, incited the January 6th attack anyway, all while knowing he actually lost. That's deliberate criminal conduct. That's not mistake or misunderstanding or relying on bad legal advice. That's Trump knowingly attempting to overturn an election he knew he lost. And the dishonest on election night testimony puts Trump's fraud at the very beginning of this entire scheme. Meadows testified Trump was dishonest when he claimed victory on election night before votes were fully counted. This destroys any narrative that Trump's concerns developed later, as he supposedly received troubling information about irregularities. Meadows is saying Trump's fraud started immediately, on election night. With a false victory declaration Trump knew was false when he made it. Consciousness of fraud from the very first moment. Not confusion that developed over time, deliberate dishonesty from the start. And here's where it gets worse. Meadows testified he repeatedly informed Trump there was no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the election outcome. Not once, not in passing, repeatedly. Multiple conversations where Meadows as chief of staff told Trump directly that the fraud claims being pushed publicly weren't supported by evidence. Trump's own chief of staff, the person he trusted most, the person with access to all the information, telling him the stolen election narrative was false. Those repeated warnings eliminate every possible defense Trump might try to raise. Trump can't claim he was confused when his own chief of staff told him repeatedly the truth. Can't claim he was misled by outside advisors when the person inside the White House with him was telling him the fraud claims couldn't be substantiated. Can't claim he genuinely believed the election was stolen when Meadows was warning him over and over that the evidence didn't support that conclusion. Trump had multiple opportunities to accept reality. Each time Meadows warned him, Trump chose to reject the truth and continue the schemes. That's deliberate. That's intentional. That's exactly what criminal intent looks like. But that's not even worst part. Meadows specifically testified about warning Trump in mid-December 2020 that Rudy Giuliani could not substantiate key fraud allegations. Think about what that means. By mid-December, Trump had been pursuing legal challenges for over a month. Giuliani was the public face of those efforts, leading press conferences, making wild allegations, and Trump's own chief of staff was telling him Giuliani couldn't back up what he was claiming, couldn't provide evidence for the key allegations. And Trump knew this because Meadows told him directly. Think about what that means. Trump wasn't being misled by Giuliani. Trump knew Giuliani was full of shit, knew his lead attorney was making public claims he couldn't substantiate, and Trump used those same false claims anyway, used them to pressure state officials to overturn results, used them to justify the fake elector scheme, used them in speeches that incited the January 6th attack. Trump knew the allegations were false, knew his own lawyer couldn't prove them, used them to try overturning the election anyway. And Meadows also testified to his personal conclusion about the election, told prosecutors he did not believe the election was stolen. This matters enormously. Meadows isn't just reporting what others told Trump. Meadows is giving his own assessment as chief of staff who had access to all available information, who reviewed the fraud claims, who evaluated the evidence, and Meadows concluded the stolen election narrative was false. Trump's own chief of staff didn't believe it, and Trump knew his closest aide thought he was lying about the election, continued the schemes anyway. Notice what the documentary evidence Meadows turned over does to strengthen his testimony. Text from mid-December 2020 warning Trump about Giuliani's inability to substantiate claims. Emails discussing fraud allegations and the lack of evidence supporting them. Notes from Oval Office meetings showing what Trump said privately about knowing he lost versus what he claimed publicly about winning. All created at the time, not reconstructed later, not influenced by subsequent events. These documents capture what was happening as it happened, what Trump was being told, how he responded, what he decided to do despite being warned. Share this with everyone because prosecutors can now show a jury the actual texts Meadows sent, the actual emails that were exchanged inside the White House, the actual notes taken during conversations with Trump. This isn't he said, she said anymore. This isn't relying on witness memory about events years ago. This is documentary proof created contemporaneously showing Trump's knowledge and intent. And documentary evidence is devastating in criminal trials because it can't be impeached the way witness testimony can. Documents don't forget. don't misremember, don't have biases. They simply show what was communicated when it was communicated. And here's where the contradiction with Meadows' own book exposes everything about what he was willing to say publicly versus what he's willing to say under oath. Meadows wrote a memoir after leaving the White House. That book presented a version of events friendly to Trump and the stolen election narrative, made Meadows look like loyal soldier, supported Trump's claims about fraud. The book sold to MAGA audiences who wanted to believe the election was stolen. But now, under oath with immunity, Meadows is telling prosecutors the complete opposite story. He didn't believe the election was stolen. He warned Trump the fraud claims couldn't be substantiated. Trump was dishonest from election night forward. Think about what that means. The gap between what Meadows wrote in his book and what he's testifying to under oath with immunity shows exactly what he was willing to say for public consumption versus what he's willing to say when lying carries federal prison time. Books don't come with perjury consequences. You can write whatever narrative sells, whatever keeps you in good standing with powerful people. But grand jury testimony is different. Lying to a grand jury is a federal crime. 5 years in prison. When you're under oath with immunity protecting you, you tell the truth because the consequences of lying are too severe. And the truth Meadows is telling destroys Trump's defenses completely. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because Meadows' cooperation extends to January 6th, and that dimension is equally devastating for Trump. During the Capitol attack, Fox News hosts were texting Meadows begging him to get Trump to intervene and stop the violence. Republican lawmakers were texting expressing horror at what was happening. Family members of Trump administration officials were texting desperate pleas for Trump to call off the mob, and Meadows has turned over all of these texts to prosecutors. They show what people close to Trump were saying in real time as the attack unfolded. They prove everyone around Trump knew it was a violent crisis, knew people were in danger, knew Trump needed to act immediately. And here's what makes this evidence so damning. Trump did nothing for hours while his own allies begged Meadows to make it stop. Let the violence continue. Let the mob search for lawmakers. Let police officers get beaten. All while people closest to him were frantically texting that he needed to intervene. That's consciousness of the harm being caused. That's deliberate choice not to stop violence he had power to stop. And prosecutors now have the contemporaneous texts proving everyone around Trump was alarmed and begging for intervention that didn't come. Share this with everyone because Meadows' cooperation also covers the classified documents case and creates additional criminal exposure. Meadows testified about what documents Trump took to Mar-a-Lago when he left office, how those documents were handled and stored, what Trump knew about their classification status, what Trump understood about his authority to declassify or retain them. All of this testimony supports the obstruction charges in the documents case, shows Trump knew he had classified material, knew he was supposed to return it, chose to keep it and hide it anyway. And here's where Trump's own words on tape make Meadows' testimony even more powerful. Trump was caught on audio recording discussing a classified Iran war plan with people who didn't have security clearances. On that recording, Trump acknowledges he can't declassify the document anymore because he's no longer president. That statement contradicts Trump's entire public defense that he had blanket declassification authority, that he could just think about declassifying things and they became declassified. Trump's own words on tape show he understood he couldn't declassify documents after leaving office, and Meadows can provide context for that recording, can explain what Trump knew about classification procedures from briefings he received as president. Think about what that means. Meadows provides prosecutors with direct evidence of Trump's knowledge and intent across multiple criminal investigations. The election interference case gets stronger because Meadows testifies Trump knew he lost and pushed schemes anyway. The January 6th case gets stronger because Meadows provides texts showing Trump's allies begging him to stop violence he let continue. The classified documents case gets stronger because Meadows testifies about Trump's knowledge of classification rules he deliberately violated. Everything prosecutors are pursuing gets supported by testimony from the one person who was closest to Trump during all the relevant events. Now let me break down why this cooperation is so difficult for Trump to counter and why his usual attack strategies won't work against Meadows. Trump has spent years attacking witnesses as biased political opponents, claimed they're never Trumpers with axes to grind, claimed they're lying to get immunity deals or plea agreements, but Mark Meadows doesn't fit that pattern. Meadows was Trump's own appointee. Trump chose him as chief of staff, trusted him with the most sensitive information, kept him close for years. It's much harder to attack your own chief of staff as someone who didn't know what was happening inside your White House or who has political motivation to lie. Make sure you're subscribed to John Brown Show because the immunity arrangement reveals prosecutors' strategic calculation about the relative value of different targets. Prosecutors don't grant immunity casually or automatically. They grant it when they calculate that getting testimony from one person is more valuable than prosecuting that person. The immunity for Meadows shows prosecutors decided his testimony about Trump was worth more than any case they could build against Meadows himself for his own role in the post-election schemes. They traded potential Meadows prosecution to secure crucial testimony against the bigger target. And that calculation tells you how important prosecutors consider Meadows' evidence. They gave up a potential defendant who was involved in the schemes to get a cooperating witness who can testify about Trump's knowledge and intent. They wouldn't make that trade unless they believed Meadows could provide evidence essential to proving cases against Trump. Evidence they couldn't get any other way. The chief of staff's unique position as the person literally at Trump's side during every key moment makes his testimony irreplaceable. Here's what the immunity structure means for Trump's legal jeopardy going forward. Meadows' testimony becomes part of the evidentiary foundation for whatever charges prosecutors bring against Trump. His testimony about what Trump knew and when he knew, it gets presented to grand juries considering indictments. Will be presented to trial juries if cases go to trial. And because Meadows has immunity, prosecutors can compel his testimony. He can't invoke the Fifth Amendment anymore. Can't refuse to answer questions. He has to testify when called, and that testimony will be used to prove Trump's guilt. And here's where the pattern of Trump insiders eventually cooperating when facing serious legal consequences shows that loyalty to Trump has limits. Michael Cohen was once Trump's personal lawyer and fixer, completely loyal, would do anything Trump asked. Then Cohen got indicted, faced prison time, and Cohen flipped, testified against Trump, provided documents, went to prison, but cooperated. Now Mark Meadows is following similar path. Started as loyal chief of staff, wrote books supporting Trump's narrative, but when faced with potential prosecution, Meadows made same calculation Cohen made. Better to cooperate and get immunity than go to prison protecting someone who won't protect you back. Think about what that means. Other people involved in Trump's schemes are watching this pattern. They're seeing that cooperation is possible, that prosecutors will grant immunity in exchange for truthful testimony about Trump, that the people who flip first get the best deals, while the people who stay loyal end up indicted. And they're making their own calculations about whether their best option is cooperating before it's too late. Before they become defendants instead of witnesses, bottom line is this: Mark Meadows, Trump's former White House chief of staff, granted immunity cooperating with federal prosecutors, testifying Trump knew lost 2020 election, Trump dishonest claiming victory election night before votes counted. Meadows repeatedly informed Trump no evidence widespread fraud change outcome, told him multiple times fraud claims couldn't substantiated. Trump rejected warnings, continued schemes anyway. Meadows specifically warned mid-December 2020 Giuliani could not substantiate key allegations. Trump knew lead lawyer couldn't prove claims. Used those same false claims anyway, pressure state officials justify fake electors incite January 6th. Meadows testified personal conclusion didn't believe election stolen. Trump's own chief of staff thought stolen election narrative false. Trump knew closest aide thought lying. Continued anyway. Documentary evidence backs everything. Texts, emails, notes from inside Oval Office. Created at time showing what Trump knew when. Prosecutors have contemporaneous records proving Meadows' testimony, not just witness words, actual documents corroborating every claim. Contradiction between Meadows' book and sworn testimony exposes gap. Book-friendly Trump stolen election narrative, written MAGA audiences. Sworn testimony says didn't believe stolen warned Trump claims false. Trump dishonest from start. Grand jury testimony under oath reliable because lying federal crime. Truth under immunity destroys Trump defenses. January 6th, texts show Trump allies begging Meadows get Trump intervene stop violence. Fox hosts Republican lawmakers' family members' desperate pleas. Trump did nothing hours while people closest him frantically texting needed act. Consciousness harm being caused. Deliberate choice not stop. Violence had power stop. Contemporaneous communications prove everyone alarmed begging intervention didn't come. Classified documents cooperation covers what Trump took Mar-a-Lago how handled stored. What Trump knew classification status. What understood about authority. Trump caught tape discussing classified Iran plan, acknowledging can't declassify anymore, not president. Own words contradict defense theory blanket declassification authority. Meadows provides context what Trump knew classification procedures from briefings. Direct evidence knowledge intent across multiple investigations. Election interference stronger. Trump knew lost push schemes. January 6th. Stronger texts showing allies begging stop violence let continue. Document stronger testimony. Trump knowledge classification rules deliberately violated. Immunity grant shows prosecutors valued Meadows' testimony about Trump more than prosecuting Meadows. Traded potential defendant get cooperating witness. Calculation reveals how important consider evidence. Chief of Staff unique position, literally Trump's side. Every key moment makes testimony irreplaceable. Can't invoke fifth anymore. Can't refuse answer. Has testify when called. Used prove Trump's guilt. Pattern insiders cooperating when facing consequences shows loyalty limits. Cohen flipped testified. Meadows cooperating. Others watching seeing cooperation possible prosecutors grant immunity exchange truth about Trump. People flip first get best deals stay loyal end up indicted. Making own calculations whether cooperate before too late, before become defendants, instead witnesses. Chief of Staff talking, documents provided, intent exposed. This story continues. Stay tuned.